Have you ever noticed how stress can creep into your body without asking permission, turning invisible worries into very visible aches? Over the years, I've seen countless patients who came to me convinced they had a heart problem, a stomach ulcer, or crippling fatigue, only to discover the true culprit was stress. It's astonishing, isn't it? Something you can't see on an X-ray, something that doesn't show up on a blood test in the same way cholesterol does, can quietly unravel your health piece by piece. I still remember a patient I'll call George. He was 71, a retired carpenter, a man whose hands had built half the porches in his town. When George came to me, he complained of chest tightness that always seemed to strike at night. He'd already been to the emergency room twice, convinced he was having a heart attack. His EKGs were normal, his arteries relatively clear for his age, but still the pain came. Finally, after one long conversation, George broke down. "Doc," he said, "it's not my heart, it's my life. I lie awake worrying about my wife's health, the bills, and my son who can't hold down a job." What he didn't realize was that his body had been carrying his mind's burdens. Stress had wrapped around his chest like a vice. That's the strange power of stress. It blurs the line between body and mind. In medicine, we like to separate organs, systems, symptoms. But stress laughs at our categories. It touches everything. It can make your pulse race, your stomach churn, your muscles ache. It can steal your sleep, blur your vision, and weaken your immune system. And with age, its grip often tightens, because the usual outlets we once had, like long workdays, raising kids, or feeling invincible, begin to change. Instead, the body becomes more vulnerable, less forgiving. I once asked a patient named Maria, a soft-spoken grandmother of 6, "When do you feel your pain gets worse?" She smiled sadly and said, "Every time my phone rings." Her adult daughter often called in crisis, asking for money, childcare, emotional support. And Maria, though she loved deeply, carried that weight in her own bones. Her arthritis flared on days of family chaos. Stress doesn't just live in the mind. It seeps into joints, into blood pressure, into the gut. Another patient, Leonard, taught me a different lesson. He was 68, a retired accountant who came in with severe stomach pain. He had been scoped, scanned, tested, and medicated, yet his ulcers kept coming back. One afternoon, after I asked him what his mornings looked like, Leonard confessed, "I wake up every day feeling like I'm late. Even though I'm retired, I still rush through breakfast, check the news obsessively, worry about politics, worry about money." His body never left the office, even though his career had ended years earlier. His stress had become a permanent companion, and his stomach paid the price. So let me ask you, when was the last time you noticed stress speaking through your body? Perhaps it was the sudden pounding in your chest before a difficult conversation, or the stomach acid burning when you sat with a worry too long. Maybe even the tension in your shoulders that no massage ever seems to fix. These aren't small inconveniences. They're warning signs. Your body whispering, "Please pay attention." Science confirms what stories reveal. Chronic stress can increase cortisol levels, a hormone that, when elevated for too long, damages blood vessels, disrupts digestion, impairs memory, and even accelerates aging itself. It's like leaving your car engine idling all night. You may not hear it, but by morning, the tank is empty, the parts worn down. That's what stress does to us quietly, day by day. And the damage doesn't stop there. Stress alters immune responses, leaving older adults more vulnerable to infections, slower wound healing, and even inflammatory conditions that feel like they come out of nowhere. It can disrupt heart rhythms, push blood pressure dangerously high, and contribute to strokes. Imagine your body as a symphony. Stress is like a drummer who plays too loudly and too fast. At first, the orchestra tries to adapt, but eventually the whole performance falls apart. But here's the hopeful truth. Stress is not an unbeatable enemy. It's a signal, a red flag waving, saying something needs to change. George didn't heal by more pills. He healed by learning to talk, to walk, to breathe differently. Maria didn't cure her arthritis, but she discovered boundaries, saying no sometimes, and finding peace in small rituals like knitting or gardening. Leonard found relief when he started replacing the morning news with a quiet walk around his block. Their bodies followed the shift in their minds. In this journey we're about to take together, I want to guide you through the hidden illnesses stress can cause, how they reveal themselves, and most importantly, how you can gently untangle their grip. Because if we don't, stress doesn't just steal today's peace, it steals tomorrow's health. And you, my friend, deserve better than that. So stay with me. Over the next chapters, we'll uncover how stress hides in the heart, the stomach, the mind, and even in places you might never expect. And as we do, I'll share stories, questions, and small reflections that just might help you recognize yourself, and maybe even loosen the weight you didn't realize you've been carrying. When people think of stress, they often imagine the racing thoughts, the restless nights, or the pounding heartbeat. But stress rarely stays politely in the mind. One of the first places it loves to hide is the heart itself. I can't count the number of times patients have come to me worried about palpitations, irregular beats, or sudden waves of fatigue. One of them, Mrs. Peterson, age 74, arrived with trembling hands and a look of terror in her eyes. "Doctor, I think my heart is giving out," she whispered. Her pulse was rapid, her blood pressure high, yet her heart structure was normal. What she didn't realize was that years of holding tension, caring for her husband through dementia, then losing him, had trained her nervous system to stay in a state of constant alarm. Her body was always on guard, as though danger lurked behind every corner. The tragedy was that this invisible enemy felt as real as any physical illness. Stress affects the cardiovascular system in ways that mimic disease. It raises blood pressure, stiffens arteries, and in some cases, even contributes to irregular rhythms that can be mistaken for more serious heart disease. It's as though the body is bracing for impact that never comes. And unlike the brief spike of adrenaline you feel when someone startles you, chronic stress keeps those chemical messengers dripping into your bloodstream day after day. Imagine pouring water onto a stone. At first the rock looks solid, but over years the slow drip hollows it out. I remember another gentleman, Alan, who was 66. He used to be a firefighter, a man who'd run into burning buildings while others ran out. When he retired, the fire didn't go away. It simply lived inside him. He'd sit at home, heart pounding, palms sweating, convinced he was about to have a cardiac arrest. The ER staff knew him by name because he came so often, yet his heart tests remained clear. What Alan was experiencing wasn't a failing heart. It was panic attacks rooted in years of unresolved stress. And here's the painful irony. Stress can make people fear their heart will kill them, when in fact, it's the fear itself doing the damage. Have you ever noticed how your own heartbeat can become louder when you're worried? How it thuds in your ears during an argument, or skips when you're startled awake? That's your nervous system sounding the alarm. For a healthy body, the alarm shuts off quickly. But as we age, and especially when stress becomes constant, the off switch grows weak. The result is a system that never fully relaxes, leaving the heart in a state of quiet exhaustion. Research tells us this isn't just in the head. Chronic stress increases inflammation inside the blood vessels, contributing to plaque buildup and narrowing arteries. It raises the risk of hypertension, strokes, and heart failure. I've seen patients who lived careful lives, ate well, exercised modestly, took their medications, but because they carried unrelenting stress, their health still unraveled. And yet, there is hope. One of the most powerful tools we have against stress-related heart problems is something far simpler than a pill. It's slowing down. I once asked Alan, the retired firefighter, what he missed most from his working years. He smiled faintly and said, "The moment after a fire was out, when everything was still and quiet." Together, we worked on creating small, still and quiet moments in his daily life. Deep breathing, walks at sunrise, even learning to sit on his porch without his phone. Over time, his panic attacks eased, his blood pressure softened, and his confidence returned. So let me turn to you. What moments of stillness exist in your life? Do you give yourself permission to pause, or do you, like so many, feel guilty when you're not busy? The truth is, the heart is not a machine. It thrives on rhythm, beats of effort followed by beats of rest. Without rest, the rhythm falters. And this is where the deeper story begins. Because stress doesn't only injure the heart, it also invades the gut, the brain, and even the immune system. It shapes how we sleep, how we digest, how we remember, and how we fight disease. In my decades of practice, I've watched patients finally heal when they began to see stress not as a weakness, but as a messenger that says, something in your life needs attention. In the chapters ahead, we'll walk further into these hidden places. We'll look at the stomach that burns when burdens are too heavy, the mind that fogs when worry lingers too long, and the body that aches when rest is denied. And through each story, I hope you'll see not just the danger of stress, but also the profound possibility of healing when we learn to listen. If the heart is stress's favorite target, the stomach is surely its closest ally. I've often joked with patients that the gut is like a diary. It records every secret our minds try to hide. The truth is, stress and digestion are so intertwined that you can't disturb one without shaking the other. Take Margaret, for example. She was 70, a retired librarian who adored baking bread and keeping meticulous photo albums of her grandchildren. When she came to me, she was convinced she had a serious gastrointestinal disease. She described constant bloating, cramps, and unpredictable trips to the bathroom. She had undergone scopes, ultrasounds, and endless lab tests, yet nothing concrete appeared. Finally, after one long visit, she admitted that her symptoms always flared when her estranged son called, or when she worried about the family's arguments. "It's as if my body refuses to digest conflict," she whispered. Her words captured something I've witnessed countless times. The gut often processes emotions more loudly than food. Why does this happen? Because the digestive system is governed by an intricate network of nerves, often called the second brain. These nerves are in constant conversation with the brain in your head. When stress pours through the nervous system, it alters stomach acid, tightens muscles of the intestines, and even changes how bacteria grow inside the gut. The result? Acid reflux, irritable bowel, ulcers, and sometimes weight changes that seem to defy explanation. Have you ever noticed your own stomach clench before a difficult conversation? Or that familiar burning rising in your chest after a stressful day? These are not coincidences. They are messages from your body. In fact, patients with chronic stress are far more likely to suffer from gastritis, reflux disease, and even worsening of conditions like Crohn's or colitis. One patient I'll never forget was Victor, a former teacher in his late 60s. He came to me after losing 30 pounds in less than a year. He described relentless nausea and poor appetite. Initially, we worried about cancer, but test after test came back clear. Eventually, as I listened, a pattern emerged. His symptoms worsened every Sunday evening. Why Sundays? Because that was when he braced himself for phone calls from his former employer, still pressuring him for consulting help long after retirement. Victor's body had been treating stress like spoiled food. It simply rejected it. Once he learned to set boundaries, his weight stabilized, his appetite returned, and his Sundays grew peaceful again. Science backs up these stories. Stress elevates cortisol and adrenaline, which in turn alter how blood flows through the stomach and intestines. Too much cortisol can thin the lining of the stomach, leaving it vulnerable to acid and infection. Over time, this leads to ulcers or chronic inflammation. Stress also slows digestion at times and speeds it up at others, creating the unpredictable swings of diarrhea and constipation that so many patients describe. It's a cruel trick. The body tries to fight or flee, but the gut is left confused, not knowing whether to hold on or let go. And yet, even here, there is hope. Healing doesn't always mean erasing stress. It often means reshaping how we carry it. Margaret, the librarian, began journaling her worries before bed instead of letting them churn inside her. Victor learned to say no kindly but firmly, freeing himself from obligations that no longer belonged to him. Their digestion calmed when their lives found more peace. So I ask you, what burdens might your own body be trying to digest right now? Are you carrying family conflicts, old regrets, or fears about the future that your stomach is forced to hold? Sometimes listening to your gut is not a metaphor. It's a prescription. In the bigger picture, stress-related digestive illness is a reminder that health isn't just about what we eat. It's about what we absorb emotionally, what we allow ourselves to release, and how kindly we treat our inner world. Because no amount of perfect diet can soothe a stomach that is constantly asked to carry the weight of unspoken pain. As we continue, I want to take you deeper into another hidden territory: our minds. Stress doesn't just tax the body, it reshapes memory, clarity, and even personality. I've seen men who once led companies lose their sharpness, and women who once led families lose their joy, all because chronic stress quietly rewired their thoughts. And perhaps this is the most dangerous of all, because when stress steals our mind, it feels like it steals who we are. If stress can twist the stomach into knots, it can also cloud the mind into fog. I've often told patients, your brain is not separate from your body. It is part of the same orchestra, and when stress pounds its drum too loudly, the music of memory, focus, and even joy begins to falter. I'll never forget Harold. At 69, he had been an engineer, a man of numbers and precision, proud of his sharp mind. He came to me terrified, certain he was slipping into dementia. "Doc," he confessed, "I can't remember names the way I used to. I lose track of conversations. My wife thinks I'm ignoring her, but I'm just blank." Naturally, we began the tests: cognitive screenings, blood work, brain imaging. To his relief, everything came back within normal limits for his age. What stood out, though, was Harold's story. He had been caring for his ill sister, juggling financial pressures, and lying awake at night replaying every decision of the past year. His memory wasn't failing because of disease. It was drowning in stress. Stress affects the brain in ways that mimic serious illness. High levels of cortisol, when persistent, shrink connections in the hippocampus, the very region responsible for memory and learning. It narrows attention, making it difficult to focus on conversations or tasks. It magnifies worry, leading people to replay problems rather than solve them. And in older adults who may already face natural age-related changes, stress acts like an accelerant on the fire. Have you ever walked into a room and forgotten why you came? Or misplaced your keys while your mind was tangled in worry? These lapses are normal, but when stress is chronic, they multiply. Patients describe it as a mental fog, a heaviness that blurs not only thought, but also mood. It can mimic depression, and in fact, chronic stress is one of the strongest risk factors for developing depression later in life. I think of Eleanor, a 75-year-old widow who once led a community choir. After her husband's death, she began forgetting lyrics she had sung for decades. She feared Alzheimer's, but what she truly faced was loneliness coupled with stress. Her days had become a cycle of rumination, worrying about money, worrying about being alone, worrying about her health. The weight of these thoughts drained her ability to hold on to the joy she once knew. With gentle therapy, support groups, and daily walks that reconnected her to the rhythm of nature, her memory loss improved. What returned, even more than words, was her laughter. Stress doesn't only affect memory, it reshapes personality. I've seen gentle men grow irritable, kind women grow withdrawn, all because their nervous systems were stretched thin. It's as if stress erects walls inside the mind, walls that block joy, walls that muffle curiosity, walls that make the world feel smaller. And behind those walls, people begin to lose not only their focus, but also their sense of self. Yet, hope lives even here. The brain is remarkably resilient, even in later years. Studies show that practices like mindfulness, regular physical activity, and social connection can actually regrow neural pathways that stress tries to erode. In Harold's case, he began keeping a worry journal, setting aside 15 minutes each evening to write down his concerns. By containing his worries to that time, he found his nights calmer and his mornings clearer. Eleanor joined a seniors singing group, which not only exercised her memory, but gave her a new circle of friends. Neither of them needed a miracle pill. They needed permission to care for their minds with the same tenderness we so often reserve only for the body. So let me ask you, have you noticed how your own mind feels under stress? Do you find conversations slipping away or joy harder to grasp? If so, know this: you are not broken. Your brain is asking for rest, for compassion, for balance. And giving it those things is not indulgence, it is medicine. As we move forward, I want to take you into another system where stress leaves its fingerprints, the immune system. Because when stress lingers, it doesn't just cloud the mind or tighten the chest, it weakens the very defenses that protect us from illness. And for older adults whose immune systems already face natural decline, that can mean the difference between resilience and repeated sickness. If stress clouds the mind, it also quietly sabotages the body's first line of defense, the immune system. In my decades of practice, I've seen patients baffled by constant colds, slow-healing wounds, or flare-ups of old conditions. They often asked, "Why now? Why me?" And more often than not, the hidden factor was stress. Let me tell you about Carol. At 68, she was vibrant, energetic, and loved volunteering at her local food bank. But after her husband passed away, something changed. Within a year, she seemed to catch every flu that went around. A scratch on her arm took weeks to heal. She developed shingles, a painful reminder of her body's weakening defenses. The pattern was clear. Grief and stress had suppressed her immune system, leaving her vulnerable. What finally helped wasn't just medication, it was grief counseling, a supportive community group, and practices that allowed her body to step out of constant alarm. Science explains what we see in patients like Carol. When the brain perceives danger, it floods the body with cortisol and adrenaline. In short bursts, these hormones are useful. They mobilize energy, sharpen focus, and prepare for action. But when the flood never stops, cortisol begins to suppress the very immune cells that fight infections. It's like a fire alarm that never turns off. Eventually, the fire department is too exhausted to respond. I recall another patient, James, who was 72 and had battled psoriasis most of his adult life. For years it remained mild, a manageable nuisance. But when his wife became ill, his stress skyrocketed, and so did his psoriasis. Red, inflamed patches spread rapidly, covering his arms and back. His immune system, once balanced, had turned against him. When he eventually found respite, through respite care for his wife and daily meditation for himself, the flare-ups eased. His skin reflected the calm he was slowly building inside. Have you noticed how illness often follows periods of deep stress in your own life? Perhaps a lingering cough after a difficult family crisis, or aching joints during a season of financial strain. The connection isn't imagined, it's biology. Stress tilts the immune system away from balance, making inflammation flare where it shouldn't and silence fall where the body needs a defense. This becomes especially important as we age. The immune system naturally slows with time, what scientists call immunosenescence. Vaccines work less efficiently, wounds heal more slowly, and infections become harder to shake. Add chronic stress to the mix, and the decline accelerates. It's not just about catching colds, It's about resilience itself, the ability to recover from surgery, to fight off pneumonia, to remain strong through winter. And yet, here too, there is hope. Small daily choices can reset the immune system's rhythm. Deep breathing exercises, regular walks in fresh air, laughter with friends, all of these reduce cortisol and restore immune balance. I've seen patients who once seemed frail begin to thrive again, not because they found a miracle cure, but because they learned to lighten their load. One woman in her late 70s told me, "Doctor, I started knitting with friends twice a week. My joints hurt less, I laugh more, and I haven't had a cold all winter." Sometimes the most powerful medicine is connection itself. So let me ask you, what strengthens your defenses? Do you allow yourself moments of joy, or are you always bracing for the next storm? The immune system listens to our emotions as much as to our diet or our pills. Caring for it means caring for the whole self. In the next part of our journey, we'll turn to another victim of stress, sleep, because without rest, even the strongest heart, the calmest stomach, and the sharpest mind will eventually falter. And when stress robs us of sleep, it sets into motion a cycle that can pull health further and further away. If there is one place where stress loves to steal quietly, it is in the night. Sleep, our most natural form of healing, becomes the first casualty when the mind cannot rest. I've often said to my patients, you can't pour from an empty cup, and nothing empties the cup faster than nights spent staring at the ceiling, replaying worries like broken records. Take Robert, a 70-year-old former bus driver. He came to me exhausted, his eyes ringed with dark circles. "Doc, I'm tired all the time, but the minute I lie down, my mind switches on. I go through every mistake, every bill, every fight I've ever had. By morning, I'm worn out before the day even begins." Robert wasn't unique. Countless patients described the same torture, bodies ready for sleep, minds unwilling to let go. And slowly, their health begins to unravel. Stress interferes with sleep in many ways. Cortisol, the stress hormone, should dip at night, allowing melatonin, the sleep hormone, to rise. But when stress is chronic, cortisol refuses to step aside. The body remains in alert mode, as though danger lurks even in the silence of a bedroom. Heart rate stays higher, muscles remain tense, and the brain keeps scanning for threats. It's like trying to fall asleep in a house with the alarm blaring. I remember meeting Doris, a 66-year-old widow, who told me, "Doctor, I can handle the days, but the nights are unbearable." She would lie awake until 3 in the morning, her thoughts racing. By sunrise, she finally drifted off, only to wake 2 hours later. Over time, her blood pressure rose, her blood sugar worsened, and her mood darkened. Sleep loss didn't just make her tired, it worsened every other condition she carried. Have you noticed how a single sleepless night leaves you irritable, forgetful, and drained? Now imagine that, not for one night, but for months or years. Chronic insomnia doesn't just steal rest, it magnifies stress, creating a vicious cycle. The less we sleep, the more stressed we feel. The more stressed we feel, the less we sleep. For older adults, this cycle can accelerate the aging of the brain, weaken immunity, and strain the heart. And yet, the answer is not simply more pills. While sleep medications can have their place, the deeper healing comes from teaching the body how to trust rest again. I encouraged Robert to create a ritual, turning off the television an hour before bed, dimming the lights, writing his worries in a notebook, then closing it as if to tell his brain, "Tomorrow, not tonight." Doris began listening to gentle music and practicing breathing exercises, slowly retraining her nervous system to wind down. Neither change was dramatic overnight, but within weeks, both reported longer, deeper sleep, and with it, brighter days. Science shows that restorative sleep is not a luxury, it is a necessity. During deep sleep, the brain clears toxins that accumulate during the day. The heart rate slows, blood pressure drops, and tissues repair. Without it, the body never fully heals. It's no wonder so many illnesses, diabetes, heart disease, depression, worsen when sleep is neglected. So let me ask you, what is your relationship with sleep? Do you treat it as sacred, or do you sacrifice it to late-night news, worries, or endless scrolling on a phone? Your nights are as important to your health as any prescription. In fact, they may be the most important prescription of all. As we approach the final stage of this journey, I want to tie these threads together. Because stress does not harm the heart alone, or the stomach, or the mind, or sleep. It weaves through them all, creating illness by 1,000 threads. And yet, by recognizing its signs, by listening to the whispers of the body, we can begin not only to protect our health, but to reclaim our peace. As we reach the end of this journey together, let me circle back to where we began. Stress, this unseen force, this constant companion, has the power to touch every corner of our health. It squeezes the heart, unsettles the stomach, clouds the mind, weakens the immune system, and steals the very sleep we depend on for healing. Left unchecked, it can carve illness into our lives so deeply that we mistake it for fate. But here is the truth I've witnessed across more than 30 years of practice. Stress does not have to define the rest of your life. I've sat beside patients who thought they were dying of heart disease, only to discover their real burden was worry. I've held the hands of men and women who believed their minds were slipping away, when in fact it was exhaustion and grief fogging their clarity. I've watched bodies fail under the weight of unspoken fears, and then, astonishingly, begin to heal when those fears were named, shared, and softened. The most powerful medicine is not always found in a bottle. Often it begins with a pause, a breath, a conversation. I think of George, whose chest pain wasn't a failing heart, but the strain of sleepless nights. Of Maria, whose arthritis worsened every time the phone rang with family conflict. Of Harold, who feared dementia but rediscovered his memory once he made space for rest. Of Carol, who caught every cold until she found community to ease her grief. These aren't just stories, they are reminders that our bodies speak the language of stress, and we must learn to listen. Have you noticed how your own body speaks? Perhaps through tension in your shoulders, an unsettled stomach, or nights when rest refuses to come. These are not weaknesses, they are signals. They say, something inside me needs care. Too often, we try to silence these signals with pills or distractions. But true healing begins when we respond with compassion toward ourselves. Now, I am not saying life can ever be free of stress. That is not realistic, nor is it the goal. The goal is balance. The goal is learning how to carry stress without letting it carry us. For some, that means walking in the early morning light. For others, it means prayer, meditation, or simply laughing with friends. For many, it means allowing themselves to say no, to set boundaries, to release the burdens that were never theirs to hold. Science continues to affirm what human stories have long revealed. The body heals best in peace. Cortisol lowers, blood pressure steadies, digestion eases, sleep deepens, memory sharpens. Stress may always knock on the door, but you have the choice not to let it move in. So as you reflect on what we've explored together, I want to leave you with this question. What small step can you take today to soften the weight you carry? Maybe it's a breath before reacting, a walk before bed, or a conversation you've been postponing. Whatever it is, know that it matters. Healing rarely comes in grand gestures. It comes in steady, gentle steps. And finally, my friend, thank you for walking through this with me. If today's stories resonated with you, I'd love to hear your reflections. What part of this journey felt most familiar to your own life? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I read them with care. If you found value in this conversation, I invite you to subscribe to Stronger with Time, where we continue exploring the mysteries and the gifts of aging with dignity, wisdom, and hope. Because growing older is not about surrendering to decline. It is about learning every day how to live well, even with life's burdens. Take care of your heart, take care of your mind, and most of all, take care of yourself with kindness. You deserve nothing less.